What's going on, YouTube? So today we're going to be pulling apart Austin's motor. I got it pulled out this past weekend here. It's basically all stripped down to the long block, minus the turbo still in the valley. But as he suspected, the crank is broken. So we're going to pull that apart. I'll show you guys what that's going to look like. It's too hard to tell right now which journal it is. Commonly, it's the snout or the first journal where it breaks. So I'm going to pull it apart and see, and then I'm going to send everything out to get machined and inspected, and then we're going to start putting it back together, hopefully in, I want to say like a couple months, but only time will tell. I don't know what the machine shop schedule is. We did get some more parts in for his truck though. Finally got the injectors and the pump. I actually had the pump sitting on the shelf for a little while here. This is a Dynamite diesel 12 millimeter CP3. So this is your O-rings for your install. And then they do a nice foam packing. And then here's the pump itself. So this is a 12 millimeter pump. Let me pull it out here. So like I said, this is a 12 millimeter pump with an LBZ regulator. And the best way you can tell is by looking at the shaft there. So it reads 12 millimeter DDP, which is Dynamite Diesel Performance. Now, some people will confuse DDP with Dan's Diesel Performance. They're both known as DDP. You just gotta specify. They both work with injectors and fuel pumps and whatnot. So this should be enough to supply the power that he's looking for. He talked to me a little bit about wanting to do an S300 kit on his truck. It's going to be sometime in the future, he says. So we'll see. I might try and have him do it now just while everything's apart. But if he doesn't have the funds to do it, no big deal. We'll just put it all back together how it was with the added fuel. So not a big deal, but should be enough fuel for the power he's looking for. And then we also have the injectors here, which are Dan's Diesel Performance. So we got Dynamite doing the pump, and then we have Dan's doing the injectors. So both technically DDP, but these are 100% over LBZ injectors. And the best way to tell if they are Dan's or not is they have their name etched into the body itself, and then it also has a date code and then the percentage over. The nice thing about Dan's injectors is that they do come with the install stuff. So here we have the O-rings, the crush washers, and then these are also the return clips that go on the LBZ return lines. So very nice and dandy. So currently the truck is still here at my house. I'm gonna end up pulling it back to the shop on the trailer. But first I gotta fix the trailer tire because one of the valve stems were leaking. And it's one of the bigger, like the thicker valve stems. So I didn't have any here at my house, so I gotta go buy some. So when we originally trailered the truck here, we had to run the spare tire. But I had to pull it back off anyway because we ended up denting this fender. So what we used to do, and I'm gonna have to make some kind of jig now because this hasn't happened prior, but we would roll one tire over one of the fenders if the truck was too wide. So these fenders were able to take that abuse up until this weekend. So I ended up bending that fender down. Obviously you can't see it now because I bent it back, but I'm gonna have to do a drive over fender, I guess, jig. So I'm gonna have to build some type of ramp that'll be supported down here or on the deck, and then something that'll disperse the weight among the whole entire fender itself, just so we don't get that bending issue again. Or we could just buy a deck over, but deck overs ride like crap unless they're the really expensive ones. And just like everything right now in the United States, it's everything is through the roof with prices. So Not planning on buying a new trailer anytime soon. Alright, so got the motor apart, crankshaft out, cam out, the rods and the pistons and all that. So it's all stripped down to the block. And just as I suspected, the crank broke on the first journal. So as you can see here, this is a common failure point. Sometimes it's not always on the first journal, but most of the time it is. This is because of the firing order. So because of the firing order, there's a lot of stress on the snout of the crank, or on the first two pistons. So that is what results in majority of the broken cranks. So most of the time the fix for that is like an alternate firing camshaft or a stronger crankshaft, like a forged crankshaft. But I found another issue with this motor when tearing it apart. Don't mind the rust on the cam. I threw this outside after I pulled it out because it was junk. So as you can see here, the hardening or the coating wore off of this cam lobe. So this motor was running perfectly fine, and I'm sure that this has nothing to do with the broken crank, but had this not been pulled out, never would have noticed an issue until, you know, further on when it wears through the cam and starts putting shavings into the motor. But that is also super uncommon. That's not really something to worry about in most engines. I looked it up. I tried to find some answers on why it did that. Biggest thing is, I think, loss of lubrication, or bad oil, or just bad parts. So people who tear down motors for cores and whatnot, I spoke to some people who do that for a living, and they tore down hundreds of cores, and maybe one or two cams have come up like that. So it's not super common, but it is a possibility that the hardening or the coating could wear off of the lobes and whatnot. So because this is an LBZ cam, had this lobe not been munched up, I likely would have just had this cam keyed and then put it on my shelf, or put it in a different motor, just because these camshafts, in comparison to LB7 and LLY, they have a better profiling, so they're more like a aftermarket standard fire cam rather than a stock cam. So in theory, these perform better than stock LB7 LLY camshafts, but since this one has a coating defect or a hardening defect, I can't really do anything with this, and it is junk. So whether it would run good or not in the truck, it doesn't matter. The whole thing needs to go in the garbage. On the other hand, the rods and the pistons were good. So the rods I'm keeping. Those can be resized and reused. They're not getting put back in this motor because he's doing Cali's rods. And the pistons are, I wouldn't necessarily reuse those pistons just because they are known for cracking. So LLY, LMM, and LML pistons are all relatively the same. They all have casting issues where they crack. This is either due to the design, the material, or tuning. Tuning is a big factor. They can produce too much heat and crack them. So I like to use just the regular LB7 pistons if I can get them de-lipped. I've been kind of working on trying to figure out where I can get that done, but LB7 pistons are kind of the standard for stock parts if you're putting a motor back together. So I'm not reusing those pistons, they're going in the garbage. The rods will get reused, and then the block I have to inspect to make sure it's good. So when addressing whether your mains are good, the biggest thing that I'm concerned about with this motor is this front main here, because the rest of it, not too concerned about, because like I said, the what's it called? The thrust bearing's right on the back. So the rest of it was still in one piece. There was not much movement. But the front here, the biggest thing you want to worry about is ovaling the main out. So the way you check this is you take your main cap and your bearings, you squish it in, or you torque it down, and then you measure your crank, and then your clearance is here. You can also do this without the bearing. Just check side to side, like all around in multiple locations. Make sure that it's still circular and not ovaled out. I'm gonna do this before I send the block out to get cleaned. I wanna make sure that it's good before I waste my time and money bringing it to get prepped for assembly. And then the other thing you wanna look for when the truck breaks a crank, especially the front snout, is your cylinder walls. So when there's that much movement in play in the front of the motor, the pistons can actually hit the cylinder walls harder or in odd orientations. So you want to make sure that your cylinder walls are still smooth and there's no scoring in here. A good way to tell is you use your fingernail and you feel around, make sure that there is no ridges in it so that your fingernail doesn't catch anything like that. This is why you do not buy your parts before you strip your motor down. Because if you bought your pistons and they're standard bore, you pull the motor apart and the cylinder walls are junk, then you're gonna have to get it either bored out or find another block. But in my case, the buyer or the customer bought the pistons before I took the motor apart. So I have to make sure that these are good, and if they aren't and they have to be bored out, then he's gonna have to send his pistons back and get a separate set of pistons. But I checked the other side. That side is perfectly good. This one is a little questionable. I'm gonna have to see what the machine shop says, see if this is usable or not. My fingernail doesn't catch, but you can definitely see there is slight scoring in there. So we'll see what they say, and then we'll go from there. And then I think I mentioned it in another video, but this motor is obviously gonna go through a different process than the other ones. With the new crank, it's gonna have to be balanced, or the rotating assembly is gonna have to be balanced. And then with the main being a possible issue, I'm gonna have the block a line bored or a line honed, my bad. And then the cylinders are gonna be torque plate honed. So basically what that does is there is a plate that runs the same orientation as the heads, and what they do is they torque it down kind of like a head would be, and then there's holes the size, or I guess a little bit larger than the cylinder, and they hone it with that plate torqued down. So basically it simulates the piston inside the bore while the heads are on, so you get a more accurate honing. So that's going to conclude this video. Just a little update on Austin's truck, and then a little informative clips of, I guess, what to look for when your crank breaks, or what can be reused and what can't be reused. But coming up, I am selling the white truck soon. I'm putting it back to stock. I pulled the motor, it's already gone. Fuel and air stuff is already gone out of it. I already sold all that stuff. So putting that truck back to stock and using my single cab drivetrain out of it, or my single cab drivetrain, resealing it, making sure it's all good, doing head studs, injector cups. Probably not injectors, because injectors were already replaced on it. But I'm using that whole drivetrain, putting it back in the white truck, and making it stock again. And then after that truck is gone, I'm gonna start doing the single cab build. So that truck is the replacement for the white truck. Now that I have a little bit more knowledge in body work, paint work, performance Duramax stuff, the plan is to build my own S400 kit, do my own transmission. I want to build a stronger motor, kind of like the one for Austin's truck. So it's going to have a Cali's crank, Carrillo rods, Molly race cast pistons, and then potentially, maybe next year or following years, depending on how long this project takes, I'd like to maybe hit that 4-digit mark. So I want to make over 1,000 horsepower. Saying that, it's going to be costly, so that's kind of why I'm getting rid of the white truck. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be time consuming. So it's going to be a long project. Everything's going to be done right though. I want this thing to be more perfect than the white truck. So the white truck was by no means perfect, but it was really nice. I want this single cab to be perfect. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up over the span of the next year. So, all right, so that's enough rambling on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.